started asking him, like, what are you going to do? Because the Colorado housing market is fire and you guys are going to sell this house like real fast. And I'm like, you need to start looking for a new place to live. And I'm like, where do you want to live?
So notice how she constantly phrases these things as if she's Chris's big sister, almost like she's a marriage counselor to Chris and his wife. Well, what are you going to do with your house? The market is fire right now. It's a perfect time to sell. How about you and your wife sell your house? You should also find a place to live. I'm just here to help you. I'm like Chris's fairy godmother. I'm just here to help. I don't care about my own self-interest. I just want to help Chris. That's the impression she is giving off. I think the CBI is buying it. But you and I, we can read between the lines. We can recognize the words, multiple words of minimization, of manipulation, right? Tons of cards from the deception deck in this. In reality, I think she's telling 100% truth, but she's leaving out the context that this conversation went more like this. When are you going to sell your damn house? The market's fire right now. You have no excuse. Sell it and also find somewhere to live. If you're actually serious about being with me, why haven't you found another place to live? Are you stringing me along? That's probably how this conversation went. And she's basically telling this that in her own words, which is fascinating, and which is how 99% of manipulators and liars do it. What did Nicole Kessinger actually say to Chris Watts? I'm Deception Detective. I'm an attorney trained in statement analysis, and this channel exists to expose lies and manipulation. In today's video, we'll analyze a segment of Nicole's interview with the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and we'll read between the lines to get to the truth of her involvement or lack of involvement in the Chris Watts tragedy. This is my second video in this series. Without further ado, let's continue listening.
Yeah, he flew out there and I thought I had like convinced him to like try to make peace with her. And I was like, if you guys work on this, like, I'm out. Because what's the point? Like, I'm not trying to be with somebody that's in another relationship, which I know that sounds silly given the whole relationship that we had in the first place, but I really was under the impression that they were separating. I mean,
all right. One thing that Nicole does a lot, and you'll notice people do this in everyday life, is they tell you the truth. So they say things that are 99% true. But the deception is in the way they spin their words, in the information treatment. For example, here, it sounds like Nicole is saying that she was trying to convince Chris to get back with his wife because she didn't want to be a mistress or a third wheel. But that's not exactly what she said. I think she and Chris argued a lot about his relationship with his wife, and I think she encouraged him to break up with his wife. And she just told us that. So listen to her exact words again. And notice how what she's saying might sound like she's the good guy in the story, when in reality, it sounds like she was giving Chris an ultimatum, if we listen to what she actually said.
Yeah, he flew out there and I thought I had like convinced him to like try to make peace with her. And I was
Right. I thought I had convinced him to try to make peace with her. What does making peace mean? Well, making peace can be I tried to convince him to have an amicable breakup from his wife, right? To get divorced, settle issues with the kids so he can come live with me. But making peace can also be interpreted as I tried to convince him to get back with his wife and make everything peaceful with her. And from part 1 in this series, where we looked at the first portion of this interview that she had with the CBI, it seems like these detectives are interpreting her words the way she wants them to. And in that section, we looked at her discussing access to her phone and the messages that she and Chris sent. Here, it looks like we're getting into the relationship between Nicole and Chris and Shanann. So the detective might be interpreting this as, hey, Nicole was, adamant that he either get back with his wife or break up, and she was trying to get him to make peace with his wife and get back with her, or not. But in reality, what it sounds like, and based on her use of the word convince and make peace, is she was trying to convince him to leave his wife. And you only have to try to convince people when they're giving you resistance. So they might have argued about this a lot. So let's keep listening. So make peace is a vague term. Technically, she's not lying. It could be interpreted both ways. But the fact that she's saying she was trying to convince him to make peace sounds like she was trying to convince him to have an amicable breakup with his wife.
I was like, if you guys work on this, like, I'm out. Because what's the point? Like, I'm not.
See, so if you work on it, I'm out. If you stay with her and resolve your relationship, I'm out of here. Once again, could sound like she's the good guy, right? If you guys resolve your marriage, hey, I'm out of here. I won't be a nuisance. But this could also be an ultimatum. Look, you either break up with her and stay with me, or make peace with her, get together, I'm out. Pick one.
I'm not trying to be with somebody that's in another relationship, which I know that sounds silly given the whole relationship that we had in the first place, but I really was under the impression that they were separating. I mean, it was like reiterated to me so many times that that's what I thought it was. And it made sense to me too because, like, he could pretty much call me whenever he wanted. Like, I was the one that would tell him, like, hey, when your kids are awake, you need to spend time with your kids. Like,
so notice how she's explaining herself now. One thing that liars typically do is they over-explain themselves. They feel the need to explain their situation in order to persuade. Why is that? Because they know they're lying. So in the back of their mind, they're thinking, hey, I know I'm lying. Maybe they do too. So I should really persuade them here. And that's one reason that over-persuasiveness is a sign of deception. When people start explaining themselves, because or so or therefore, it's a good sign that they might be lying to you. And that is, of course, in my deception deck, my 52 favorite rules for spotting deception and manipulation, which you can order at deceptiondeck.com. So we can see here that she's explaining why he thought they were on the outs, when in reality, if she actually believed that, she could just say, he fooled me. I didn't need any reason to believe it. He told me it. I believed him. Done. Instead of gathering all this evidence and presenting it as to why she thought they were split up. If she actually thought they were split up, why would she feel the need to convince him to either repair his relationship with his wife or break up with her so she's not a third wheel? There's lots of inconsistencies in Nicole's story.
Like, do that. And then after they go to bed, like, if you want to talk to me, you can talk to me. But it was never like this super, super restricted thing. Like, sometimes, like, right after work, if I was, like, still talking to him, I get kind of bummed out. And I tell him, just like, oh, it's frustrating sometimes, like, having to, like, wait. But at the same time, I was never like, this is horrible or...
So notice how she minimizes. I told him sometimes it was frustrating that I have to wait. Also, the fact that she knows she's waiting because he's with his wife means she knows they're not split up. Even the fact that she said it was never super restrictive means that it was to a degree restrictive. She was aware that to a certain point his wife was restricting his ability to call her. So we've caught her in a lie, minimization, and exaggeration. So she minimizes her role, right? I told him once in a while I was kind of frustrated. I told him either make peace or, hey, I'm out of here. I don't want to be a nuisance to your happy marriage. She minimizes the role the wife played. It wasn't super restrictive. It was a little bit restrictive that he had to tiptoe around his wife. The point is that Nicole doesn't necessarily give outright lies. She deceives through the use of exaggeration and minimization, right? And minimizing. And that is what 99% of people do. 99% of people will not fabricate a bold-faced lie. Instead, the most common way to lie is they will just omit something. So they'll tell you a story, but they'll leave out the context that makes them look bad, so that you're left with an incorrect perception of what happened. And then really sophisticated liars like politicians, or lawyers like Alan Dershowitz, who I've analyzed on the channel, what they do is they do something called information treatment, where they tell you the whole truth. Everything they say is true, but they also add extra words on top of it and extra grammatical techniques to actually distort your view of the truth. So that if you ever do call them out on lying, they can say, well, technically I didn't lie. I told you the truth. It's not my fault that you interpreted it that way. And if you want to see some examples of that, you can watch my video, How to Spot a Sophisticated Manipulator.
You know, it was always like, I understood why. But then once his kids were asleep, he never, like, had any... It was like he could do what he wanted. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
He was in his basement, and she's upstairs, and they're not speaking. So it kind of made sense. It wasn't like...
And you guys are just texting.
So notice how she says it kind of made sense. She uses lots of deceptive words. In fact, if I were to count all the cards in the deception deck right now, right, that Nicole uses, we would have a royal flush. Right? She uses minimizing words. She uses exaggerating words. So here she says it was kind of. So let's play that again. And this is something, right? I know lots of the videos I do are true crime videos, and that's because that's the videos that my audience watches, because the stakes are high. True crime names are well known around the world. Everyone knows Chris Watts. Everyone knows Nicole Kessinger. Everyone knows Madeleine McCann, John Benet Ramsey, etc. But the lessons from my videos can be used in your personal life, your work life, in every avenue of life where someone is communicating with you and you're worried that you might be getting deceived. All right, so let's listen to Nicole again. Remember, she maintains that she thought they were broken up. However, she's already pointed out that there was some restriction to a degree that the wife imposed on his ability to call her. She admits in her own words that it was only after the kids went to bed that he was free to call her, that she was aware the wife was upstairs and he was downstairs. So it sounds like she was well aware they were together. And when she was telling him or convincing him to make peace with his wife, that could very well be her trying to convince him to make peace, as in to end things. Or, and I know very little about this case, and I've never seen this interview before, right? All I know about this case is what I've seen in a Netflix documentary, which was mainly about Chris, and this first part of the interview that we analyzed together. Another phrase that has the word peace in it, now that I think about it, is when you have someone rest in peace. Could that be some leakage that she asked him, or maybe joked about him killing his wife, make peace with her? Possibly. Although from what I've seen so far, I do not think Nicole was actually involved in the murders. I think Chris is a psychopath. I think that he did it all on his own. Nicole might even be a victim of his and that she was actually duped by him. But as far as her involvement with him and lying about what she and he talked about, I think they probably had some very serious discussions together, and they used different apps than just texts and phone calls, which we analyzed in part 1. All right, so let's listen here.
Why? But then once his kids were asleep, he never, had any... It was like he could do what he wanted. Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
Sure.
He was in his basement, and she's upstairs, and they're not speaking. So it kind of made sense. It wasn't like...
And you guys are just texting.
Right, it kind of made sense. And here's the lesson of the day about that. What is kind of? Kind of is a weakening modifier. And I'll just read you the rule. So each card in the deception deck has a rule. They're basically flashcards. A rule to memorize and a real-world example. So what is a weakening modifier? How can you spot them in your own life to tell if someone's lying to you or trying to mislead you? Phrases like kind of, sort of, and seemed like indicate uncertainty, whether they are used correctly by someone being honest or misleadingly by someone who is lying. Any statement following these phrases should not be automatically accepted as true or accurate. So if someone says, I kind of woke up at 9 a.m., I don't know why I'm late to work. Well, kind of is a weakening modifier. Maybe they woke up at 9:15. Maybe they woke up at 10 a.m. Or if someone says, I kind of like you, that means that you probably shouldn't ask them out to the prom because they're not committing to liking you. They just kind of like you. They're weakening. They're using the word kind of to modify their statement in a way that weakens it. So when she says it kind of made sense to her, in her own words, she's telling us it didn't make perfect sense. She, I'm sure, had very, very real suspicions that he was still with his wife and that she was the mistress.
Texting and
or talking or whatever,
Right.
you know. I mean, and it was like I said, it was at certain times, but that time, and originally it wasn't, but it was me that put that time frame on there because I thought he should hang out with his kids.
Also, lots of what we can see here is we have to read between the lines to recognize just how strict she was with him and how persuasive she was. In my opinion, she was very upset with him about being with his wife. So notice how she says, well, I told him to only call me after he was done with his kids. That probably means that she argued with him and said, you know what, don't call me until you're done with those kids and that wife of yours. You can't have it both ways. Either ditch them and get with me or stay with them. Until you're done with your kids, don't call me. That's the impression I get from her setting that boundary. She didn't say he set that boundary about only calling her after he was done with his kids. She said it. And the context she's leaving out is probably that it was in a way that was an ultimatum. And it might have planted the seed in his head that, hey, getting rid of my wife, in his crazy head, right? There's no justification for what Chris Watts did. He deserves to be locked up in prison for the rest of his life. And depending on the laws in Colorado, I don't know if they have the death penalty, he deserves that too. However, that might be what planted the seed in his head that, hey, getting rid of my wife is not going to be enough. Because she also only wants to talk to me after I'm done with the kids too. So let's rewind again. Notice she set the boundary about the kids. But she's downplaying it. We have to read between the lines. And by read between the lines, I don't mean we're interpreting her words. I'm listening to exactly what she's saying. And I'm putting it into the context of the word she's using to minimize it. So when is using a weakening modifier or minimizing words, that means that more happened than what they're saying. And we need to factor that in. All right, so let's listen.
And it was like I said, it was at certain times, but that time, and originally it wasn't, but it was me that put that time frame on there because I thought he should hang out with his kids.
Right? I put that time frame on there because I thought he should hang out with his kids. So do you, right, there's two options here. Do we think that she put that time frame on because she really cares about his relationship with his children? The fact that she's cheating with him on the mother of those children suggests that's probably not the case. It's more likely that she imposed that time limit to punish him for spending time with his kids and to make it more difficult for him to get the satisfaction of her attention while he still had his kids around. And this is the definition of a manipulator. That she can say that directly to the CBI's face, directly to the interviewing officer's face, and he can interpret it as if she did Chris a favor in order to help salvage his relationship with his children and his wife. And I'm sure lots of people interpreted it that way. But what I do not want to do is interpret it too far. The fact that she probably argued with him about spending time with his kids and didn't like the fact that he spent time with his kids does not mean she said to him, Chris, the only way I'll be with you is if you kill your kids and your wife. So we're reading between the lines as much as we can to get to the truth of the matter, to the truth of the conversations they likely had together. But we don't want to overstep. We can't go beyond her words. For example, if she says something like, I told him the only way I'll be with you is if the kids are no longer in the picture, that would be a giant red flag. Then we'd really have to dig into that. But she hasn't said that yet.
Those 2 times you were at his house, did you see any evidence of that? Him living in the basement? Did he ever show you that area or anything?
I've seen, yeah, I went down there and saw his little workout equipment, and there's a bed down there all set up, and the basement was all clean and organized and stuff. So, like a decent bed set up. So it made sense to me, like, hey, this is what's happening down here. So I saw it.
Even though his family was in North Carolina for multiple weeks, it appeared that he was still living in the basement.
Mm-hmm. Well, and he told me sometimes he would like go upstairs and sleep if like he was home alone, because I know she'd like go on business trips and stuff. But he's like, I don't like that bed anyway, so he didn't really like sleep up there. I was like, okay. Even when it was just him. So
Okay.
That was the impression that I got. I don't know what you're talking about. North Carolina.
Let's go back to North Carolina.
So North Carolina. So he still made very frequent communication with me when he was out there, and at one point he told me that they sat down and they talked about it, and he told her that he wanted to either fix things or...
All right, so she said he made very frequent communication with me when he was out there. That is interesting. And it goes back to part 1 in this series. In part 1 of this series, we analyzed a segment of the interview where the CBI were asking Nicole permission to look at her phone. And they asked her what she and Chris used to communicate. And she said they used text messages and phone. And she said she had no social media on her phone. The way she answered those questions indicated to me that they probably used different forms of communication besides just text messages and phone calls, which is why she was making sure that they limited their search of her phone, their consensual search of her phone, to just text messages and phone calls. And in my video, I said it sounds like she might have used something like Telegram or Signal or WhatsApp. And I had lots of comments of people telling me that she actually admitted later in this interrogation, or this interview rather, that she and Chris used Skype. So I'm looking forward to getting to that part. Hopefully, if this video gets to 50,000 views, I'll do a part 3. Just like last time, part 1 just hit 62,000 views, which is why I'm making this part 2. I only want to make videos that my audience wants to watch, which is why I set a goal for us to reach before dropping another part. All right, so here she says that he made frequent communication with her. That is interesting. Why the vague, long description of how they talked? Why not say he texted me while he was there or he called me? Because she just signed over her phone to them to look for that, and they might not see texts and phone calls. But she doesn't want to admit to using some other communication app, like saying that he called me on Skype, or he Skyped me, or Telegrammed me, or messaged me on Instagram, or whatever other form of communication they were using, because I'm willing to go all in that they were using some other form of communication. And in my part 1, I also discussed a way the CBI could have bluffed her a little bit to get her to reveal what that was. So it's a shame that they continue to drop the ball, even in this section of the interview. I think she said he still made very frequent communication with me because they were using whatever other app she does not want to admit to communicate while he was in North Carolina. So just make note of that weird turn of phrase.
Or like to
Also note that it's not a lie, right? So that's another big point I want to make in this video. Whether it's your personal life or your work or you're an investigator, I know I have lots of investigators, insurance investigators, psychologists who follow my channel, who are subscribers. Thank you to everyone who subscribes to my channel. Thank you to all my members. But whether it's in your professional life like that, or if you're just working a different sort of job that has nothing to do with assessing whether or not people are lying. We deal with deception every day. You should be aware of that. If someone uses a deliberately vague way to say something that should be easy to say, that should be like an alarm bell in your head. Why did they phrase it that way?
try to fix things, and if she didn't want to fix them, then they needed to like move forward with the separation and like actually file for a divorce at this point was the impression that I got from this, and was what he told me. And so he said that she was like pretty receptive to just not trying. He was like, she seemed like she just wants me to go. He's like, when she has her mind made up, she has her mind made up, and that's what she wants. And he's like, she doesn't want to try anymore. And he's like, and neither do I really. And he was like, it's done. And he's like, and then the next day, I don't even know what days these were. Sometime when he was out there, he told me, we're putting the house up for sale as soon as we get back.
Also, notice all these updates he's giving her, right? That we're going to file for a divorce. I'm selling the house. She said it's done. Do you think he was telling her all those things unprompted? It's possible, right? He was just keeping her in the loop. Or that these were reassurances he gave her whenever she was grilling him about the progress he was making with officially divorcing his wife and getting her out of his life. I tend to lean towards the latter. I suspect that it was Nicole asking him, well, what have you done? Why have you made any progress? Get rid of her already. Sell the damn house. And him saying, okay, she told me it's done. I will sell the house. She said it's over. So I imagine these are reassurances he's giving her in response to questions from her and prompting from her. So I think she was more aware of his situation that she's letting on, and she probably pressured him a lot to advance getting rid of, officially divorcing his wife and moving that along. In other words, I think Chris was under a lot of pressure from Nicole to do something big about his marriage, to finally end it. And because he's a psychopath, in his crazy little mind, the easiest thing to do was to literally get rid of his wife and children. Whereas a normal person would probably just get a divorce. So just because I think Chris is a psychopath and truly evil and deranged, doesn't mean I think that Nicole isn't manipulative and was probably nagging him about it. Doesn't mean she's a killer, doesn't mean she's a murderer or even accessory to murder, but she is a classic manipulator, and that's why I think people are fascinated with her. And one reason I think my other video did so well is because people are more likely to meet manipulators like Nicole in their daily lives than they are to meet a true, genuine psychopath like Chris Watts. So spotting the types of lies and manipulations of Nicole is more important for my audience to recognize, just because they're going to encounter it more often. If you do encounter someone like Chris Watts, then it's extremely important to be able to recognize the signs of a psychopath. And I have multiple videos. I actually have, I think, like 2 videos titled How to Spot a Psychopath, which you should watch.
And I was like, well, that was quick. And he was like, it's her, she's ready to go. And I was like, okay. And so I left it at that. And then he got...
Right. So notice how she says, so I left it at that, which means she allowed him to end the conversation there. So even through the words she uses, she reveals that she was the one prompting these constant reassurances from Chris that he was going to do something about his wife. And eventually, I think the pressure built up and he did something insane. Something that Nicole could not have predicted. Although I am very curious what was said on Skype, if that is in fact the only other app they use to communicate. I suspect they had multiple other apps they used to communicate based on my analysis of the first part of this interview. And it's a shame that the CBI did not do a better job of getting that stuff included, or at least bluffing about it to get her to reveal more information. I point out a very simple, classic bluff they could have used that anyone can use in an interview in my first video about Nicole.
Got back and I started asking him, like, what are you going to do? Because the Colorado housing market is fire and you guys are going to sell this house like real fast. And I'm like, you need to start looking for a new place to live. And I'm like, where do you want to live?
So notice how she constantly phrases these things as if she's Chris's big sister, almost like she's a marriage counselor to Chris and his wife. Well, what are you going to do with your house? The market is fire right now. It's a perfect time to sell. How about you and your wife sell your house? You should also find a place to live. I'm just here to help you. I'm like Chris's fairy godmother. I'm just here to help. I don't care about my own self-interest. I just want to help Chris. That's the impression she is giving off. I think the CBI is buying it. But you and I, we can read between the lines. We can recognize the words, multiple words of minimization, of manipulation, right? Tons of cards from the deception deck in this. In reality, I think she's telling 100% truth, but she's leaving out the context that this conversation went more like this. When are you going to sell your damn house? The market's fire right now. You have no excuse. Sell it and also find somewhere to live. If you're actually serious about being with me, why haven't you found another place to live? Are you stringing me along? That's probably how this conversation went. And she's basically telling this that in her own words, which is fascinating, and which is how 99% of manipulators and liars do it. They tell you the truth, but they leave out the context. They omit the context of how exactly it was said or what led to it. So let's listen to that again.
And so I left it at that. And then he got back and I started asking him, like, what are you going to do? Because the Colorado housing market is fire.
Right. I started asking him, what are you going to do?
And you guys are going to sell this house like real fast. And I'm like, you need to start looking for a new place to live. And I'm like, where do you want to live? And I was really trying to help him out. I'm like, do you want to get a house? Do you want 3 bedrooms so you have one and each of your girls have one? I'm like, do you want to...
Right. I was really trying to help him out. I don't think so. And even now, she can't help but put the patronizing and mocking tone, just a little bit of it, that she probably used when she was actually saying this to Chris. Do I think for a second that she actually cared where his children were going to sleep in a new house? Of course not. This sounds like the tactics of someone trying to manipulate him or trying to bully him into selling his house and doing what he promised he would do, which is sell his house, get away from his wife and kids, and go live with her in a new residence.
Like do an apartment. Like, what do you want? Where do you want to live? Because he's in Frederick, but that whole area over there is just like a bunch of small towns, and you can kind of just pick and choose. Everything's kind of, and so he told me, well, I like Brighton, and I was like, okay. And then he told me he wanted a 2-bedroom apartment, and he said he wanted 1 room for him and the other room for his 2 girls. And I thought it was kind of cute. Like, I remember telling him, I was like, yeah, me and my sister had bunk beds, like, at my dad's house. And I was like, when we were little girls, and me and my sister the same age apart is.
Again, ask yourself, why were they talking about bunk beds? Why was she telling him about bunk beds? Probably because they were both sitting down in front of a computer and she was trying to convince him to get a 2-bedroom apartment rather than splurging on a 3-bedroom apartment. And saying, your daughters can sleep in bunk beds. You and I can take the master bedroom. When your children come visit, They can use that room. We don't need 2 rooms for your daughters. Is this a big leap? Could I be reaching? Yes. However, I'm going based off of the type of deception that she uses, which is lies by omission, which is specifically how she leaves out context. And Jada Pinkett Smith, Ruby Franke, lots of the manipulators we've analyzed on the channel use this form of deception because it is extremely easy to do and it's very common. You don't have to make up anything. You don't have to fabricate an alibi or invent a story in your head. You can literally tell the truth, but just present it in a much softer, more pleasant way than it actually happened.
Him and as his 2 daughters, so I told him, I was like, they're gonna love it. I was like, they might be like stuck in one room together. I was like, but they'll become like best buddies. And it was really exciting. Like, I liked helping him, and I just wanted him to, like, I don't know. This is what he told me he wanted. So I was like, well, I will help you do the research. But another thing that I really took care of was to be like, where is she moving to? I was never like, you know what, screw your wife, try to get full custody. None of that bullshit. It was always just like, I'd ask him, I'm like, well, what?
So is Nicole Kessinger his realtor or his mistress? I believe, once again, everything she says. I do believe she said, where is your wife moving to? Do I think she asked it like this? Well, where's your wife moving? We have to make sure your wife has somewhere safe to live and it's convenient for the kids. Or did she say it like, where is she moving? And it better not be a 2-hour drive away where I have to spend an entire day shuttling your kids back and forth on visitation days.
What kind of custody you guys going to have? Because he at work, they're about to switch his schedule. So right now he's like a Monday through Friday, and they're about to switch these guys to 8 days on, 6 days off.
That's tough.
That's awesome. And I was asking him, I was like, are you going to have your kids like on that set of days off? I was like, because that would work perfect. Like 1 week on, 1 week off. And I was just like, we just talk about it. And I'm like, what is your plan? And he's like, we haven't figured out exactly what we're going to do about the kids yet. But he told me, he's like, Colorado's a 50-50 state and she's okay with everything 50-50. Like, he said that she was like on board with this because she wanted it too. Like, she was checked out of this relationship. So that was like how he made this sound. That it was like a very like kosher word.
Interestingly, checked out is another slang term for dead, right? So rest in peace, checked out. I wonder if they joked about his wife dying or joked about him killing his wife. I know lots of other YouTube channels, true crime channels, know a ton about this case. And in my comments in my last video, lots of you guys know way more about this case than I do. But I just want to say here clearly, if someone wants to react to my video and add context and details I don't know, whether or not they conflict with what I said or they actually add to it, like if someone knows what houses they were looking at, I would be very interested in seeing your reaction. And in fact, I have a whole playlist for people reacting to my videos. So if you do react to one of my videos and add good context, I want to feature you in this playlist. I want to give you credit. You have my permission to react to my videos. And in fact, I'll recommend this video by YouTuber Zawoki, who reacted to my first video in this series. So if you want to check out his channel, I watched it. It's just a fun, different take. And he clearly knows a lot about the case. So Zawoki, if you want to react to this one or any other YouTube channel, react to it, please, and add your insights. It helps me develop my theories, and my audience will be exposed to your channel through this DDX Collaborations playlist.
We're done kind of thing.
Did you ever give him like books or articles or anything to read about saving your marriage? Did you ever provide anything to him like that?
About saving his marriage?
Yeah, like how to recover a marriage or how to save your marriage. There's all sorts of publications and books out there.
No, but I did tell him, and I don't.
So this is probably the first good question they've asked. So you're telling us how much you wanted him to make peace with his wife and wanted to make sure the children were taken care of, and were even offering to help find an apartment for his wife to live. Did you ever provide any literature or blog articles or anything that would help him save his marriage? And you could see her reaction. Save his marriage? No. Of course not. I wasn't trying to save his marriage. Which is what we came up with about 11 minutes ago when we first started watching, when she said make peace. It was clear to me, at least, that when she said make peace, she meant an amicable split. But it was vague. It was open to interpretation. So I'm glad the CBI at least pinned her down on that. She wasn't trying to rescue the marriage, no matter what she tells us here. No matter how much she's acting like she was a real estate agent for the family, trying to make sure everyone has a nice little condo to live in. She was urging him and nagging him to break up with his wife. That much is clear. It's also particularly clear because whenever she says he told her something, it was always in response to something she asked. So it's not like he's constantly providing her updates and keeping her in the loop and excited about it. She always says, I asked him and he told me this. I left it at that. It's clear that whenever he's providing an update on his breakup from his wife, it's because Nicole is prompting him to provide that update, most likely in an argumentative situation.
And I don't know if I did this through text or phone. That will be something you guys will, I'm sure, figure out. But I told him a few times, like, I think that you should take the time to read some articles about what separation does to kids. You know, and I told him, I said, when my parents separated, we were literally like 3 and 5. We were almost the exact same age as these little girls. And I told him, I said, you know, I was so young when it happened that it didn't really have like a big negative effect on me because I was so small that I didn't really process it too well. I was like, but I do have cousins that they're...
Interesting what she's saying here. So she's saying I was the same age as the girls, but it didn't negatively affect me because I was so young. In what context would she have told him that? Probably in rushing him to get the divorce. Look, if they get any older, it's going to have a big impact on them. They're going to be in school. They're going to remember it more. You need to break up with her now while they're young and it won't impact them, because that's what happened with me. I was young. My parents got divorced and I don't even remember it. Everything she's saying is true. It's just up to us to provide the context, which is why we have to take a couple leaps in logic. Or not even logic, just a couple leaps in understanding the context of how she said it. Why would she be making the argument that it's better to get divorced when the kids are young at the age they're right now than try to save the marriage and wait? Because that's in her interest. I can imagine her saying that in the context of an argument, in the context of pressuring him or debating him. Look, get divorced now while the kids are young. The longer you wait, the more risky it's going to be. That's going to impact them.
Their parents got divorced when they were like 10, 11, and I think that it hit them a little harder, you know, and he's like, oh, they'll be fine, you know, and I told him, I was like, even though they're small and you think that they'll be fine, I was like, I think you guys should just read about it just so that you guys are prepared in case, you know, one of these two starts having a hard time with the fact that you guys aren't in the same house anymore, you know, and I would tell him, I was like, you know, there's pros and cons to it, like, because he was like getting ready to do it, and it would be like, you know, it's kind of cool having 2 Christmases, and, you know, like, your parents get to go, you know, be happy doing whatever it is they want to do with their lives, and they don't.
So she's providing all the reasons that divorce is good. Really, it sounds like she was pressuring him and nagging him, and in his sick mind, he considered his only option to fully get rid of his wife and children in order to be with her. I don't think it is at all her fault that he murdered his wife and children, because that's just not a reasonable expectation. If you pressure someone to divorce their wife, any reasonable person would not expect them to go kill their wife and their kids just because you pressured them or gave them an ultimatum. The reasonable expectation is, okay, they're going to divorce their wife and be with me, or they're just going to dump me and stay with their wife and save their marriage. So while Nicole is deceptive and manipulative, and probably put a ton of pressure on him to divorce his wife and to reduce his involvement with his children, I don't think we can blame her for what he did. That said, I've only analyzed a certain portion of this interview, and I do believe that they communicated on other apps that she's not disclosing to the police, which means that maybe she did go beyond just a suggestion. Maybe she did ask him to do more severe things, or gave him a clearer directive, or helped him plan a theoretical, half-joking murder. So I won't rule her out completely, just like I did in part 1, because I simply don't know enough, and because she's shown enough signs of someone who is deceptive and trying to sneak stuff past the police while giving herself deniability. So she's telling them the truth, but she's leaving out a ton of context, even when it came down to searching her phone. She said, check my phone calls, check my text messages. That's basically the only way we communicated. Or I think she actually used her favorite weakening modifier, right? Like, that's kind of the only way we communicated, or pretty much. Which to me was a big red flag that they used other apps or social media or tools to communicate.
They don't have to be in a situation that's probably not good for the kids because it's not good for those two. But at the same time, it was like, just read. Like, that's what I always used to tell him. I'd always tell him to, like, I tell people to read about everything. Reading is so good for you.
So he, at this time, is telling you that, yeah, I am the guy trying to save the marriage and she doesn't want it.
That's what he told me. So, and then he was like, she doesn't want it, so I'm not going to do it. And then it was like, we're filing for divorce, we're selling the house. And this was like all as soon as they were coming back from North Carolina, like boom, 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 boom.
Would you recall when he gets back from North Carolina?
No, I don't even know how long he was out there. I know it was like less than 2 weeks and more than 1.
Okay.
I don't remember.
So Nicole probably gave him that ultimatum: leave your wife and children within the next whatever week, or it's over, while he was in North Carolina. And she probably gave him the ultimatum through some other app or communication method besides text or phone call. Based on what she said earlier, which was, he made very frequent communication with me. Right? Not that we were texting back and forth or we called each other. Frequent communication. That's a very vague term. It could leave open, they were talking to each other on Instagram, they were talking to each other on Snapchat, they were talking to each other on, end-to-end encrypted tools like Signal, Telegram, Skype, etc.
I don't remember.
So he comes back early August. Would that be fair?
Oh, yeah. It was definitely like in the first 2 weeks somewhere.
All right.
Probably the second week of August at some point in that. I don't remember when.
Does his wife come back with him at that time? Or
Yeah, they all came back.
They all come back at the same
They
time?
all came back. And then, so he continues to just, tell me that this is like what he wants. And so I took the time, and you will see that in the text too, where I I found this apartment. It was perfect. It was so cute. I was like, it's in your price range. It's like 6 miles from the gym. It's 23 miles from work. I'm like, it's super close to Frederick. It's going to be by your kid's school. Like, this is the spot, and I told him, I was like, okay.
So notice all the persuasion. Right? These are conversations she had with Chris. Get divorced now while the kids are young because it won't harm them. Here's the perfect apartment. Go here. The market's fire. Sell your house. She's saying this as if she was doing it out of, like she was his secretary. And he said, find me a house, find me an apartment, look up school districts. In reality, I think she was pressuring him and bombarding him with these things as a way to pressure him to finally make a decision.
I'll keep looking for more places. And he's like, well, there's some that I want to go see too. And he actually had me thinking that he was going to go look at these places this week. before all
Okay,
this.
so this is fairly
Interesting. So the week that he killed his wife and children was the week when he had to tell her, I'm going to go look at apartments. It sounds like their debates about what he was going to do was reaching a fever pitch. It sounds like he was at the point with Nicole where it was either shit or get off the pot. Are you going to go with me to look at these apartments or not? Why is your house not listed? Why have you not signed the divorce papers? Do it now or be done with me. It's over. Chris was probably under a ton of pressure from her. And being a psycho coward, decided to murder his wife and children rather than disappoint Nicole or break it off with Nicole.
fairly recent then, if we're
this
talking.
just happened, like in the last.
He's going to go.
All right, so this just happened. All this fever pitch about where to live, all the stuff she was sending him was probably piling up in his head. Where are all those messages? I want to see all those communications. From what I see here, it sounds like Nicole was basically being a pushy mistress. It sounds like she was sending him apartments, sending him stuff, and then he interpreted it as, okay, I need to do something dramatic now. And I'm too cowardly to break up with Nicole, and I'm too cowardly to divorce my wife, so I'm going to do the most cowardly thing, which is kill little kids. Kill my own kids and my wife. If Nicole had helped him plan the murders or something along those lines, or encouraged him to do the murders, I don't think she would be telling us about finding the apartments. Because I don't even think she realizes how that factored in. The fact that she's saying this just happened, I just sent him all this stuff for this apartment, he just promised me he was going to look at them, means that even she might not realize how much impact she had on his decision. It probably all happened internally in his head. But because she deleted her messages with him before going to the police, and because she sounds deceptive about listing all the ways they communicated, I am not willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. So I'm not going to rule her out, but so far I haven't ruled her in because it sounds like she's admitting more than she realizes right now.
Go look at apartments.
He wanted me to go with him.
When you say this week, are you saying
Like this
Monday
this
was the 13th?
like this week.
Okay.
Yeah, so I told him, I was like, well, pick out a few spots, and if you want me to come with you, I'll go look at them, but you know.
You said earlier that.
So notice the choice of words. I told him. I believe her. I believe she told him, pick out some spots and we're going to go look. Not like I asked him or I suggested he pick out some spots or he told me he picked out some spots. When she says she told him, I believe her.
That he had never, or that the apartment wasn't for you and him. It was just for him and his children.
Oh, yes.
It was, you had no intentions of moving in with him.
No, I have my own spot. I still have a lease there till July. And even then, like, he never asked me to move in with him.
Okay.
And I never tried to move in with him. I mean, I told him, I really try to take everything with this whole situation very slowly.
So this is an interesting response. Let's rewind.
His children.
Oh, yes.
It was, you
I'll go look at them, but you know.
All right, so the question is, did Nicole think that she was going to live with him in this new apartment? Because if she did, that's a sign that what the apartments she was picking were going to be where they lived when he broke up with his wife, which suggests that the ultimatum was pick a new apartment for you and me to live and dump your wife, or stay in your old house, stay with your wife, and I'll be out of your life.
You said earlier that he had never, or that the apartment wasn't for you and him. It was just for him and his children.
Oh, yes.
It was, you had no intentions of moving in with him.
No, I have my own spot.
All right, so no, you had no intentions of moving in. No. That could be an honest answer in that, no, I wasn't going to immediately move in. In the beginning, it was going to be him and his children because I have my own spot and I was going to stay there till my lease was up. Or I wanted the divorce to cool down. Once again, everything she says could be 100% true. But notice how when she says no, she immediately elaborates and says, I had my own spot. So maybe after her lease was up, she was planning to move in with Chris. So her answer about no, I wasn't going to move in could technically be true depending on the time frame.
I still have a lease there till July.
What about after July?
And even then, like, he never asked me to move in with him.
Okay.
And I never tried to move in with him.
He never asked me. That wasn't the question. The question was not, did he ask you to move in? That might have just been implied. And then the third, right, the fact that she's listing all these reasons why it's no is a good sign that it's sensitive to her. A good denial is direct and short. So for example, if I say, did you plan to move in? No. I didn't plan to move in. Done. No, I wasn't going to move in. Done. But if I say, no, my lease goes till July, well, that might mean that you're telling me, no, you weren't planning to move in until July. So technically, you're not lying to me. It's my fault for misunderstanding what you said. I assumed you never planned to move in when you were being honest and you told me I was going to move in after July. After all, that's why I told you about my lease ending in July. So if anyone ever played this back to Nicole, let's say things didn't go down the way they did. Let's say Chris didn't kill his family, and a year from now, she and Chris were living together, and someone said, hey, didn't you say you never planned to move in with him? She can say, I never lied. I said, I had my own spot till July, so I moved in after July. Or he never asked me to move in. Well, he asked me, so I moved in. The third reason she gives is I never tried to move in. Well, of course not, right? He doesn't have the apartment yet, so that makes sense. Once he has the apartment, she can say, well, I tried to move in after he got the apartment. He said yes.
I mean, I told him, I really try to take everything with this whole situation very slow. The only part that I screwed up on was the fact that he wasn't completely separated from her when him and I decided to spend time with each other. That is where I screwed up. But other than that, everything else, it was always like, you build your life, I'm going to build my life, we will intertwine them, but I am not ready to do this. And he respected that. And I even said that, and I don't know, that might be in the text, but said that too, where it's like, Chris, you need space. You're just getting out of a divorce. Personally, I think jumping into a new relationship is a little quick. It's like, I was in a relationship earlier this year, and I think this is also a little quick. And I'm like, so why don't we take our time? And I'm like, if you guys end up doing a week on, a week off with your kids, I'm like, the week you have your kids, be with your children. And the week that you don't, I'm like,
All right, so once again, this sounds like a complaint disguised as an offering to him and his kids, right? The week we were with your kids, I'm hands off, I won't be there. Well, she's his girlfriend, right? He wants to spend time with his girlfriend. This could very well be another ultimatum. If you're with the kids, count me out. You need to pick me or the kids. That could very well be how it went down. It could have been an ultimatum about the wife and an ultimatum about the kids.
I don't even want to see you every day. I'm like, I think we should spend a few days of that together. I'm like, because I like my space, and I think you need your space. I think you need your space to develop your identity again and get it back, because I think he's just been.
So notice how she's recounting what she told him, and it sounds like she's lecturing him. You need space. You need to get your identity back. It sounds almost like she's lecturing him for trying to have his cake and eat it too. Right? Why can't I be with you on the weekends and we keep this going while I'm still with my wife and my kids? No, you need space. You need to figure out who you are. You need to divorce your wife, You need to sell your house. You need to get as low visitation with your children as possible. You need to do all these things before you can spend time with me. So notice how she says she's the one who set the boundaries about when he could call her. He could only call her after the kids were in bed. She set that boundary, not him. She set the boundary about spending time with him. If you're with your kids, you can't spend time with me. One way to interpret it is, well, she really cares about his relationship with his kids. She doesn't want it to be awkward. So if he's with his kids, of course she'll stay behind the scenes. She won't show up there uninvited. Or we can interpret it the way, with the context added, that she did not approve of him spending time with his kids because she set that boundary. If you're with the kids, I won't be there. Count me out. And in fact, that's why I won't move in. I will stay at my own place until you sort out what's going to happen with those kids of yours.
It's been like so wrapped up in this whole thing that he's got in his own life and his life that he doesn't remember probably what it's like to like be single or have time where it's like just him.
Sure.
And so I was just like, like embrace that. I think it's a beautiful thing. And I really try to like take it smart with all that. And it was just.
And so embrace that. Spend time alone. Does that sound like she was giving him what she wanted or sound like she was punishing him? Yeah, well, you want to call your kids all day and spend time with your kids? You can sleep in bed alone. Tough for you. You can spend another night alone. All right, so we're coming up on an hour of recording, so I'll wrap it up here. If you want a part 3, please let's get this video to 50,000 views. That way I know you guys like it and want to watch more. Also, please watch the video in its entirety. YouTube really cares about view time. So the more you can watch the entire video, the more it helps get it spread in the algorithm and indicates to me that, hey, I should prioritize Nicole Kessinger and we'll knock out part 3. I really want to see where she talks about her opinions on Shanann. We've not seen that yet. On your screen right now is a video I recommend you watch next, as well as my playlist for this case if you want to see the rest of my analysis. Until next time, stay true.